Hello, my friends. Hello. I almost went live to the wrong stream. Uh, welcome. Welcome to the Emanuela Orlandi mystery. She's also known as the Vatican Girl because Netflix has put out a a wonderful little docu-series about her, and it's really fascinating. If you haven't watched it, it's been there for a while because I saw it quite a while ago. Um, if you haven't seen it yet, I tell you, you really should. Let's see here. Now, where's my comment? Well, hello, Mary Lou. How are you? I almost went live on the wrong stream. It was a good thing I looked up and saw. Hi, Trish. How are you? Good thing I looked up and it said, "Hi, Michaela. Welcome." And it said, "You're not supposed to go live until like the 25th." And I looked and I thought, "Oh my gosh, I almost did a true crime case on positive affirmation Tuesdays." So it's a good thing I checked. Hi, Ronnie Lynn. How are you? So that reminds me, for anybody that is watching this video later as a video replay, it originally aired as a live stream. So you will hear me interacting with people during the live stream. And if you would like to join a live stream with live chat, then hit the notification button on the channel. And of course, if you enjoy this, hit that old like button and subscribe. Let's get started. This is Emanuela Orlandi. Like I said before, she's really popular. She's very popular, Larry. Here I go, making up my own words again. Known as the Vatican Girl. Okay, and she was born January 14th, 1968. So, gosh, just a little bit before me. She'd be the same age as me, just a little bit older. And she lived in Vatican City, which is its own, it's what I found out that I didn't really know. It's its own state. It's like a country within a country. So they have their own laws. It's whatever happens to their citizens, whatever happens in their city, it's under their jurisdiction. It's nobody else's business how they feel, and nobody else can tell them what to do in the walls of that city. These are her parents. Well, I'm going to have a hard time with these Italian names. Her mother's name is Maria. Her dad's name is Ercol, Ercol, and Emanuela was the fifth of four children. They lived in Vatican City because her father worked for the Vatican. He was actually, I would almost liken him to a personal secretary of the Pope. So if you wanted a personal private audience with the Pope, you went through him. You scheduled it through him. That's who would meet you in the outer office. So he was a kind of a big deal. He served under three popes. Pope John Paul II being the last one that he served under. These are some pictures from the Orlandi family. They're from actual footage from some home videos of the Orlandi family. Family was very close. They had an apartment, still have an apartment in Vatican City, even though Emanuela's father died in 2004. Her mother, Maria, still lives in the family apartment. Emanuela was one of four daughters, and she has one older brother, 8 years difference, named Pietro Orlandi. And he said even though there was 8 years between them, they were very, very, very close. him and Emanuela were. You can see here's a map of Vatican City. It's not very big. At the time that Emanuela went missing, um, which she went missing in 1983, Pietro, who's dedicated his life really to trying to find out what happened to his sister. And I think it's because he feels a lot of guilt, and we're going to get to that. He said there was only about 400 citizens that lived there. So, listen, that's not a lot of people, right? That's not a lot of people. Pietro says that living in Vatican City for them as children, it was living in a village with this the Pope as your benevolent ruler and overseer, and of course with his family's, his father's position, the family was close to the Pope. He said the Vatican Gardens were literally their playground. And he said it was just really an ideal childhood. By all accounts, an extremely, extremely close and happy family until the tragedy happened with Emanuela. This is a photo taken with the Pope. That's Emanuela in the glasses. Her brother said, and that's her mother Maria over there on the left. Well, think your left, my right, and one of her older sisters standing behind her, right next to the Pope. And her brother said Emanuela felt very proud to have her picture taken with the Pope. He was a big deal, right? The Pope still is a big deal, even though it's not that Pope anymore. That Pope has been canonized and is now a saint, according to the Catholic Church. But it was a big deal, and she was very proud, but she hated her glasses. So, that's how it is for us girls. That's Pietro, Emanuela's older brother, and this picture was taken Christmas of 1993. So only about 6 months after Emanuela went missing, and Emanuela was 15 when she went missing. There's 8 years difference. Pietro here was 23, and he said during this meeting is when the Pope offered him, a 23-year-old with no experience whatsoever, a job working for the Vatican Bank. And he said he looks back at that moment now, and he's very suspicious about the motives that the Pope may have had for appointing him to that. And I think you'll understand when we get there. I think you'll understand whatever your religion. And look, I've done a lot of research. There's a lot of stuff out there for you guys to watch. Some really great stuff. Not just on Netflix. So don't worry if you don't have Netflix. There's some great stuff on YouTube. And, I saw somebody who does a podcast, and they said, I don't really want to come up missing, Pope, so don't come after me. But after years and years and years and years of some really scandalous scandals that come out of the Vatican and the Catholic Church, this podcaster said, I don't really rule anything out when it comes to them. And I kind of have to agree. I don't really want to come up missing either. And none of you want me to come up missing, because somebody will have to take care of these dogs if I do. And nobody wants that job. Nobody. So don't come after me either. I'm just saying. I'm just keeping it real from my perspective. And that's some crazy things seem to happen with the Catholic Church. So her brother says he does look back, and he really questions what was really going on that a 23-year-old with no experience would get appointed to the Vatican. So we'll see what you think after you watch this. This is Emanuela's father. I did not pronounce his name. We're just going to call him Mr. Orlandi because I don't know how you pronounce that name. And he was very proud. He was very dedicated to his work for the Vatican. He was very dedicated to every pope that he served. But he did say, Pietro says that right before his father died in 2004, he did say to his family, I have been betrayed by those that I have served. So on the day that Emanuela went missing, it was kind of a normal day around their household. Beautiful day in Vatican City. And it was June 22nd, 1983. They said it was pretty hot that day. And Emanuela was, she played the flute. She also sang in a choir. And she had music lessons at a school that was just outside of the Vatican. So it was not inside Vatican City. It was just outside. She would have to take a bus to get back. And Pietro says he remembers his mom was making homemade pizza that night for dinner. And Emanuela, because it was a little warm, she came to him and she wanted to ride to her lessons. And he said no. He said no because he had already made arrangements to take his girlfriend to a university. And his girlfriend had many times accused him of showing favoritism towards his little sister. And so he says he really, really regrets this. But he said he decided that day that he was going to stick to his guns. And he was going to show his girlfriend, right, that he, wasn't at his little sister's bidding. And he was going to show his little sister that, hey, I'm 23 and I have a life, right? You go take the bus to school, little girl. Go take the bus to your lessons. So he said they kind of had a little argument. And she grabbed her flute and she left. Yeah, and he says that, and I think I really, you got to imagine now. You have to imagine. 23 years old, you're not all that worldly, right? And this is an extremely close family. And he chose his girlfriend, who I'm sure is long since no longer in the picture. He chose that day to make a stand for that girl, and then his little sister goes missing. And I think that's why he's dedicated his entire life to trying to figure out what happened to her. And I'm going to tell you, I watched a lot of things with him in it. And some of the things that I saw, that I read, that I heard when I was doing the research were horrible. They're horrible for anybody to have to listen to. I cannot imagine the pain that it must have caused her brother to have to listen to a set of audio tapes of his sister being tortured. I just cannot imagine. Poor guy. So they have a little bit of an argument. He sticks to his guns. She leaves and goes off to get her lesson. And this is her school. Like I said, it's right outside of Vatican City. And At some point, she calls home, and I can't remember. I can't remember if she called home right before, when she got to school, right before she went into her lesson, or right after she was done with her lesson, before she was supposed to get the bus to come home. But she called home and she spoke with one of her older sisters. And she was really excited. She said that on her way to her lesson, she had gotten approached by a man. And he wanted to offer her this, a really large amount of money, especially for a 15-year-old girl, to hand out flyers for Avon. Probably just go door to door, stick them, on the door, put them in mailboxes, maybe hand them out on the street. And her sister said that she was a little bit taken aback because it was such a large amount of money for a young girl, for one day of work. And she said to her, well, that's exciting, but I think you should talk to mom and dad first and see what they say. Because I'm sure one of her parents would have gone with her to meet this guy and find out what was really going on, right? So that was the advice her older sister gave her. And of course, it doesn't look like Emanuela took that advice. This is her friend Maria. Maria went to the same lessons, went to the same school to get lessons as Emanuela did. And she was the last, I can say she was the last person to see Emanuela, because obviously somebody or a couple somebodies saw Emanuela after Maria. But Maria and Emanuela normally rode the bus together after their lessons back to Vatican City. And that day, Emanuela walked Maria to the bus stop and said, no, I'm going to go meet this Avon man, right? I'm going to go meet him and talk to him about this job that he wants me to do. And then I'll take a bus home and I'll catch up with you later. And of course, Emanuela was never seen again. Later that night, you can imagine the whole family still lived in the apartment where her mother, Maria, still lives today. They were getting frantic, and for a couple of reasons. One, it wasn't like Emanuela not to come right home or to call. Two, as her brother said, it was way past the normal curfew for the Orlandi household, he said. But three, and this is really important, Emanuela's lessons were outside of Vatican City. And at midnight, Vatican City closes and locks their gates. And it doesn't matter. You're not coming in and you're not going out. So they were getting frantic. And they went to the police. The police said it's too early for you to file a report. She probably went for pizza or something. These kids. Probably just some of the normal escapades, right? And then one officer said, well, why don't you get a picture of her and bring it to us just in case, and we'll pass it around to people on the team. And so Emanuela's sister did that and said that one of the officers said to her, well, I wouldn't worry too much. She really isn't that pretty after all. And I can I can't imagine how that felt either. I can't imagine how any of this felt for this family. This is a officer who came forward about 12 days after she went missing, after the Pope had made an announcement when he was doing, making another announcement. He mentioned Emanuela and her family. And this officer came forward and he said, I saw her. I saw her and I spoke with her, and she was with a man. And they brought in a sketch artist, and this was what they came up with. And the officer said, yeah, that's as close to what the man looked like as possible. That was with her, and I'm sure that it was her. And so the police had that, but they weren't really doing anything. The family got tired of the police not helping. So literally what they said was, one morning Roma woke up to Emanuela's face plastered everywhere. The family had forged ahead. They had gone and printed up some missing posters, and they had put them up all over Rome. And 11 days after she disappeared, so this is roughly, she disappeared on June 22nd. This is roughly July 3rd. The Pope makes one of his announcements, right, from one of the windows of the Vatican. And even though Emanuela's father had gone to work every day and had seen the Pope every day, they had never spoken about Emanuela, because it would have been considered to be improper, to be insolent, for anybody to question the Pope. And so Emanuela's father said they never spoke about Emanuela missing, which I think strange. Don't you think that's strange? I mean, the Pope is a Pope. The Pope is a priest. Like, who do Catholic people go talk to about their problems? They're priests. Who's supposed to comfort them? They're priests. This is the priest of all the priests. And you're not going to talk about it? Didn't say a thing. But during this speech that he was making, to his people, he brought it up. And he said, she needs to come back home. Her family's in pain. Whoever has her needs to bring her back. And what the Orlandi family has said, as well as many Italian journalists, and I'm going to trust the journalists here, because that's the journalist's job, to cover these types of things. It's a journalist's job to know things about whatever community or state or county or authority that their paper or television station or radio station has jurisdiction over. It's their job to know about all the big players in it, right? And everybody says that's not what popes do. It's not what popes do. Popes don't make public comments about private matters like this. And I have to say, I find it a little odd that he would make a statement about Emanuela during this mass speech, right? I mean, Vatican City is full of people, adoring people, full of people waiting to hear his message of hope and unity, right? And he never talks to the Orlandi family about her missing, but he makes some comments here. And he doesn't just make comments once. He does it 7 different times. 7 different times. Now, true, this poor girl has been missing since 1980, 41 years. She's gone now. But for it to be noted that a pope would just never comment on anything like this, and then he does it 7 times. What did happen after this, there's Dan Rather, because the Pope making a comment about this missing girl, it then became world news. And Dan Rather, of course, is a reporter. Well, he's retired now, a very prominent reporter here in the United States. And Dan Rather says, what was just another typical missing teenager case. It's kind of how he put it, right? Because nobody had really heard about it. He said has now been escalated because of the Pope's interest, involvement, him speaking on it. So it got national attention. And what happened was 2 days after the Pope made that announcement, there was a phone call. So 13 days after she disappeared, there was a phone call to the Orlandi residence, and a man was on the phone, and he said, "We have Emanuela," and they played a recording. They said it sounded very much like her, where she said her name, and she brought up some a lesson that she was studying for the flute, kind of things that her family would know what lesson she was studying, because she probably drove them crazy at home doing it, right? But they also, and they said he sounded like a nervous American, so they called him the American, and I think he went by the name of Mario or Luigi, and I'm not joking there. I'm not joking. It sounds kind of funny, but I'm not joking. And why it will sound funny to some people is Mario and Luigi are they're characters. They're the Mario Brothers or something like that. It's like some big Nintendo game, right? I don't know how big it was in 1983, but so a lot of people said those definitely cannot be this guy's true name. But what they said was, we have her, and you have 14 days if you want her back, but you have to release this guy. And this guy is called Agca. Okay, Ali. Oh, these names. I'm going to call him Ali Agca. Ali Agca free. Well, Ali Agca is not free. And they said that the nervous American named Mario said that Emanuela had been abducted. She'd been kidnapped by the KGB, by the Soviets, and that the Soviets had trained Agca, and that if they wanted Emanuela back, they had to release Agca in exchange. Now, this is where it gets interesting. 2 years before Emanuela was kidnapped, because now we can't say she's missing anymore, right? I mean, she is missing, but we can't say it's a runaway or she just went out for pizza. Now we have people calling saying that they have her making demands. That's called a kidnapping. And they don't just want any exchange. This was a big deal because in 1981, Aka was the man who tried to assassinate Pope John Paul II. Does anybody remember that? He had been convicted by a Turkish court. He had taken off, so he was convicted of murder in absentia, which means he didn't show up for court. They went ahead with the trial anyway. Found him guilty. He was on the run. He made it to Italy. He got a room and he took a Browning 9mm into Vatican City. And while the Pope was making his way through the city, Ronnie Lynn says she remembers that, Aka shot the Pope. So this wasn't just any prisoner that the kidnappers said they want to release. This was a prisoner that had significant ties to the Pope in the Vatican. He tried to kill the Pope in Vatican City. 1981, I believe. Anybody else remember that? So this now people kind of start to go, wait a minute. This can't be a coincidence, right? That a Vatican girl, a girl born a Vatican citizen, born and raised in Vatican City, is now being held until the man who attempted to murder the Pope in Vatican City is released. He is serving life in prison and has been serving it since 1981, and they never considered swapping him out for Emanuela. And I will say that Aka, he denied. He said the Soviets did not train me. I don't have anything to do with the Soviets. I don't know what the Soviets want with me. Don't give me to them. And that says a lot. You'd rather stay in prison than be traded to the Soviets. But he said, I don't know them. I don't want to know them. They did not train me. They did not send me in to kill the Pope. Don't do it. And they didn't. Now, nobody was doing much of anything. And right before the 14-day deadline was going to run out, the Pope, remember, he had just given a little announcement, a little speech to everybody 2 weeks before this. He gives another one. And he brings Emanuela up again. Now, things start to really happen. Another phone call comes in. There's going to be 2 more phone calls. There's going to be a lot more phone calls, actually. Phone call comes in, and this time the American says, listen, we're going to leave a package for you in a basket or a garbage can, right? Somewhere in Rome, and you pick it up, and there's going to be proof that we have Emanuela. When the police got the package, there were photocopies of Emanuela's student ID and also a receipt for her schooling. So her parents had sent her probably with a check, some kind of form of payment to school, and she had gotten a receipt for it, and they had that. So they couldn't deny that whoever this was had at some point come into contact with Emanuela, right? It's pretty hard to deny that at this point. here we are again at that photo. Now you got to remember, here's this kid, 23 years old. It's starting to look like there's ties to the Vatican somehow with this girl missing. And when Pietro goes and sees the Pope with his family at Christmas time, that's when the Pope gives him that job at the Vatican Bank, which is a really big job, really big deal. And I'm going to tell you about another phone call that came in, and I did have pictures of the transcripts, and I had thought about playing the audio, but I'm going to tell you it was a little disturbing. Another package was left for the family, and this time it contained an audio cassette. And I listened to it. I listened to the original audio. It had been edited. Her brother, Pietro, has listened to it probably thousands of times. I don't know how he's done that. He says he could make out his sister's voice, but obviously she was in a lot of distress. She was clearly being assaulted. Clearly being assaulted. And it was sad, and it was really disturbing. And I will say, hold on. So her brother said that he could tell that it had been edited because he thought he could make out, every now and then he could make out a man's voice or partial. And sure enough, later, he actually gets a hold of the transcript from the tape before it was edited. And he got that from the Secret Service. And listen, the transcript was in Italian, but I certainly know how to take phrases and have Google translate them for me. And I would say that the Secret Service had it pretty spot on, and that's when they said in the beginning of the report that clearly there was, they labeled Emanuela, or the female in the tape, they labeled her as A, subject A. They said clearly that was a passive woman, so she was not partaking voluntarily with anything that was happening to her. And B, subject B, was for the men. And like I said, you could definitely, like I said, there was reasons I didn't post the pictures of this, because you could have looked it up yourself, but I'm just going to tell you, I looked it up. It says that the Secret Service says that it's obvious that she's being abused, and that it's obvious that it's some kind of a sexual abuse, and that at one point the Secret Service had determined that she had been abused by 3 different people in a row. And the tape, yeah, I could see that. I could hear that. I believe it. And she's asking why, and she's, saying how much it hurts, and saying, what is that? And, oh my God, that's blood. And at one point she's just begging him, please, it hurts. Just let me go to sleep now. And, when I looked up some of the different phrases that was being said by whichever man was subject B at that time, he was saying things like, no, I just want to do something. No, this is what I want to do. This is where I want to go. And it was really, really, really disturbing. And I think that, of course, it's disturbing to think of any human being being treated like that. let alone, 15 years old or not, she's a child. And this was not done by her consent. And obviously she was being held against her will. But what really, really killed me was her brother listening to it, already knowing the guilt that he had. That he was just a kid. He was just a kid himself. And I can't imagine the scar that left with him. So all kinds of bad things happening not too far into her disappearance. And listen, I know that none of this stuff is easy to talk about, but we're grown-ups and we got to talk about it. And it's what happened. And so I spared you the audio tape and I spared you the transcripts. But that's what was happening. This is a journalist that I think became very close to Pietro and the Orlandi family at some point. He followed the case from the beginning. And at one point, Pietro meets with him years and years and years later. Because you got to know that this case it lay dormant for years until the early 2000s. Okay, so over 20-something years, nothing was being done except her brother just pounding the pavement. And this guy relentlessly followed up every lead. And I'm going to tell you something. Most roads all led back to the Vatican. I'm going to let you make up your mind. So years and years and years and years later, at least with these pictures, I'm sure Pietro and Andrea met plenty of times, but they meet. And remember what I said about the journalists, especially journalists that cover Vatican City? They really understand the pulse. Right? They understand the feelings and what's going on, and they really come to understand the policies and the procedures with each different pope. And so they know when things aren't really, when things just aren't really right. Okay, this is Pietro, boy, that poor guy. This is years and years later. And he's talking to Andre, and he says, he's asking him, that very first speech that Pope John Paul II made on July 3rd, what did you think about that? That very first time that he said something about my sister. And this journalist, who, like I said, not only covers Vatican City and understands, and doesn't just understand the motions and goings on at Vatican City and the way that different popes and different popes, when a different pope comes on, kind of like a president, they get to bring their own staff on, and there's also a Vatican press room. So press are always going to be in contact with the press room, right? And he says that statement was not random. And he said, of course it wasn't random because we're talking specifically about a specific incident and a specific girl. It wasn't random because that statement was made to somebody in particular. We don't know who, but the Pope was not making a generalized statement. He was using that platform to speak he was intentionally speaking to somebody. And he said, I think he knew who he was sending that message to. It was a message being sent to a person. So I guess popes are not above passive aggressiveness, but I think we've all done that. I think we know what he's talking about, right? When we make what seems like a generalized statement about something, but we're really saying it because we want a specific person to read it or see it or hear it. and get the message and get it together, right? We've all done that. We've all done that. I'm not the only one. And this journalist said, essentially, that's what the Pope was doing. Now, this is Emanuela's parents, because I cannot pronounce her father's name. We'll call it Mr. Orlandi and Maria. There they are with a picture of Emanuela. They never gave up hope. They went to rallies and they spoke to press and to journalists whenever they could, to try to keep their daughter's name out there and to keep her story relevant, which isn't easy because 1983 and 2024, I mean, not just 40 years have passed, but I mean, come on, think about what life was like in the 80s compared to what life is like now. So it's not easy to keep one girl's name and story alive because her parents never wanted to give up hope. It's not easy, but that's what they did. And her father continued to work until his death in 2004. He continued to work for the Pope. But like I said, right before his death, he did say to his family, I have been betrayed by all of those that I have served. That's not a light statement for somebody that's been a lifetime employee of the Vatican, especially in what his job was, which, I mean, he wasn't a man of the cloth himself, but as a civilian, he worked about as closely with the popes as you could. I mean, you think about any executive and their personal secretary or executive assistant is about the closest person to them in their company. And I don't think it could have been that different. But he said, I have been betrayed by all those who I have served. Now, this is where it's going to start to get interesting. Her father died in 2004. By the way. And so now here we are in 2005, 22 years since the disappearance. Not much has happened. And a phone call gets made to a television station. And it says this is regarding Emanuela Orlandi, right? And he specifically says regarding the facts of the Emanuela Orlandi case. To find the solution to the case, go see who's buried in the crypt of the Basilica of Saint Apollinare. Okay, that's inside Vatican City. That's where one journalist, I would tell you, said that's where princes and great artists are buried. What is this guy talking about? Go see who's in that crypt. And then he says, go see who's in that crypt. And the favor, check out the favor that Renatino did for Cardinal Poletti at that time, which makes you think that somebody did a favor for a cardinal, because not just anybody can get buried inside of this place, inside of the basilica, right? No way. It's going to have to go through cardinals and bishops, and people are going to have to sign off for it. And in fact, when they did find the person that was buried there, it was the first person that had been admitted to be buried there in over 100 years. Wait till you find out who that person was. This was a newscaster at the time. This was a big deal. And the person in that crypt when they opened, you could open it and see who's in there, is Enrico de Pedis, and it's a gangster. A gangster was buried inside of the basilica in Vatican City. A gangster from the Magliano gang was entombed in there. Now people are going, what? There he is. People are going, what? What? Is this not shocking to anybody? A gangster from a gang. Who was? I don't know, Ronnie Lynn. I don't know. Ronnie Lynn says, did a cardinal abuse her and get her killed? I don't know, but how did a gangster get buried in Vatican City? He was one of the leaders of the Magliano gang before they all started to get assassinated one by one. And in fact, he was shot and killed on the street. If you're just a normal person and you want to get buried inside the Vatican, you're going to have, your family is going to have to show up with a whole lot of proof of all the good deeds that you've done throughout your life. I would sure like to see a list of his good deeds. So they find out that he's buried in there. And her brother, Pietro, Emmanuel's brother, says, he goes to the authorities and he says, you have to open that tomb. We have to see if there's anything in there that's buried with him that will give us any clues about my sister. And the authorities wouldn't do it. Of course, no, Mary Lou says he probably didn't have any good deeds. And I mean, I would kind of have to agree with you about that, right? So, I mean, look at his stuff. That's not shabby. That's not a pauper's grave there. Oh, and by the way, I just got a message, so I can't see you in chat. But hello, Sharon Knowles, and I'm glad that you found me. When you sent me a message and asked me where I was right here doing this, so I couldn't answer you back. But I'm glad that you found me, and welcome to the show, to the mystery. No, I don't think he had any good deeds. But look at that. I mean, first of all, you think of where he was buried, and then look at how. I mean, the Vatican wasn't just doing something nice for a poor family. I mean, he got dolled up. He got dolled up. What did he have to do with her? What did a gangster? So first she's tied. First phone call, we think that she's tied to Adka, right? The guy who tried to assassinate Pope John Paul II. First, right, during that first phone call, oh, she's going to be a part of something that has to do with Adka and the KGB, right? And the assassination. And now she has something to do with one of the biggest leaders of the Magliano gang, which is essentially like the mafia. This is a 15-year-old girl. How could she possibly be tied to people of these different calibers and really seedy people, right? It's a 15-year-old girl. A Vatican girl went to a music lesson. A fourth of 5 children. Happy marriage. Born in Vatican City, a Vatican citizen. How could she possibly be tied to a almost assassin and a mobster? It's shocking enough that the mobster is buried in Vatican City, but why did the caller say, if you want to know about Emanuel Orlandi, you go see who's in that crypt, and then look into the favors that were done to get him there. This is Sabrina Minardi. Sabrina doesn't look like much, right? If you watch Netflix, The Vatican Girl, you're going to see her in it. Sabrina is quite a character. And Sabrina came forward in February of 2006. So we had DePetty, who was, we found out in 2005, right? 22 years after Emanuel goes missing. We find out that a mobster who someone's alluding had something to do with Emanuel's kidnapping is buried in the Vatican. And then the very next year, in 2006, Sabrina Minardi pops up. Now, Sabrina Minardi, she was kind of a big deal in Italy in the late 1970s, okay? She was married to a football star. And they were a big deal. They were kind of a power couple. I bet you they were kind of the Italian version of Victoria and that cutie pie Beckham, right? Probably the equivalent of that. And she made all the headlines because in 1982, a year before Emanuela went missing, Sabrina Minardi left her husband, little cutie patootie football player. And who do you think she left her husband for? DePetty. She left her husband for a mobster. And she came forward in 2006 and she made this statement in the prosecutor's office. And what she said, she gave testimony. And she gave testimony with a nut. Right. So somebody says, girl, you in danger. Well, when you watch Netflix's The Vatican Girl, and I hope you guys can, you're going to hear a crazy tale about what happened, what Sabrina Minardi said happened with that girl. And Sabrina Minardi said it was a wild ride with DePetty. Cocaine and all kinds of crazy stuff, right? She went from being this little football star's wife to really living a different kind of life with DePetty. And she gave a statement, and she was very clear about being involved the day that Emanuela was taken. She also spoke about Emanuela being kept someplace, being heavily drugged, which makes sense. There's been a lot of statements about that. But then what she says happens is she is told to take Emanuela and to drive her to this spot where Pietro is standing. And let me tell you something. There's nothing there, really. Okay, I think that this is right outside of Vatican City. And literally where her brother is standing, that where you can kind of see the white part at the end of that little wall. It's like gated off, okay, and then it's almost like, I don't even know what you would want to call that. It's kind of like a place where a cop or a highway patrol would hide with his radar gun, if that makes sense. And then zoom, he can, get you on radar speeding and then come out right after you. That's really all it really is. There's nothing there. And she says that she's told to drive Emanuela there. Emanuela's in the back seat of this car with another guy, to drive Emanuela to this spot. And they're going to meet up with a man in a black clerical dress and a BMW with Vatican plates. And that's what she does. And she says that the person that she handed, or that was in the back of the car waiting, was a man named Marcinkus. And Marcinkus, there he is right there. Marcinkus actually was, here we go. Marcinkus was the head. You're not going to believe this. Was the head of the Vatican Bank. He was Pietro's boss after Pope John Paul II gave Pietro that job with no experience in the Vatican Bank 6 months after his sister went missing. Now, I just got to stop. I got to say something here. These ties, everything about Emanuela going missing so far, and granted, in 22, 23 years at that time, there hadn't been a lot of leads, right? Why is everything heading back to the Vatican? I mean, could you make up? Could you make up? Oh, could Sabrina Minardi make up handing off Emanuela to somebody in a clerical dress and in a black BMW with Vatican plates? Sure, but what are the odds that she would say it was Marcinkus? How would she know that Marcinkus had, well, he was the head of the bank, but that he had been Pietro's boss since the year that his sister went missing? Ronnie says, knowing about all the priests involved in sexually assaulting children in the Vatican, it's not hard to think they were involved in cover-ups. Well, I have to agree with you there. I mean, and listen, and we're not just talking mess. We're not just gossiping. And I'm not trying to offend anybody that's Catholic, or follows the Pope and follows. I'm not trying to offend you, because you ought to be offended already. You ought to be offended already by what's been going on. And it's been a mess, and it's been a mess. And there's been plenty of times when the Catholic Church has paid settlements rather than go to court, because they're going to cover up for their own. And they don't want their priest going to, when have you heard about a priest going to prison? You don't. They settle the case with the victims, and then they move the priest someplace else. You can get mad at me all you want, but I'm not the one that did it. You want to get mad, you get mad over there. Because I'm going to tell you, I'm Jewish, and if any of the rabbis were doing it, it would be a problem. I would have a problem with it. You get mad at me, I don't care. But I'd be mad. And I'm mad that anybody does it to kids, to tell you the truth. But no, it is not hard to believe that they would cover up because they do it. They do it. But what are the odds that Sabrina Minardi would know that? Oh, now look, and Cynthia Devil. Hi, Cynthia. She says in Baltimore, the archdiocese filed for bankruptcy to keep from paying the victims. That's sad. That's sad. But it's very telling. And you want to be religious? And then you're doing that? You know he wasn't broke. You know he wasn't broke. I would say liar, liar, pants on fire, but he wears a dress. Liar, liar, skirts on fire. Archdiocese. So you get mad at me. I don't care. I'm not the one that did it. Yes, Ryland says priests here in Rochester paid, and they move the priests around after sexual assaults. Yes, they do. After allegations, they just move them. So it happens. And listen, we're not trying them publicly here. It's not what we're trying to do. This is it's true history. The question that we're asking, that we have to ask, knowing this, is that, is it then possible that they would cover up any involvement with this girl's kidnapping? Well, yeah. I mean, if it walks like a duck and talks like a duck, that's the question that we're asking. Is the past behavior enough to say that it's a possibility? And I have to say, we can't rule that out, right? But I encourage you to watch some stuff on this yourself. It's really shocking. Michaela says the Catholic Church has covered their crimes for hundreds of years. Yes. Cynthia says they did that here in Baltimore too. We have a law that removed the statute of limitations. Hundreds of victims came forward. Yes, I remember when they did that. There used to be a statute of limitations for sexual abuse, and they lifted it, and there was there's been several huge lawsuits against the Catholic Church, right? So, Ryan says, I'm sure that this happens with rabbis and reverends too, not just priests. I'm sure it does. I just have to wonder, maybe not on this scale, because we don't seem to hear about the other ones. If you hear about a church being in trouble, it always seems to be these guys. They need some help with their PR. I'll tell you that, and something else that starts with a P, because they got PP problems. PR problems, something else that starts with P, problems, PPP problems. God, they need help. Somebody help them. Help them, Jesus. Help them, Jesus. Help them. Help them. Help them. Please stop this. Got me as a Jew up here talking to Jesus. Oh, Lord, have mercy. Where has this case gone wrong? All right. They finally get into Depetus's crypt. Finally get in there. And because, listen, when a lot of this stuff came forward, poor Pietro, right, Emmanuel's brother, he was just gung-ho with the press. He was like, finally something. And that person called the television station. So it really couldn't be denied. But he was so thrilled to finally have something that could really get her name back there. And so when they finally went and opened up this crypt, he thought that it was because of all the notoriety that the case had been receiving, right? And the fact that the Vatican couldn't deny that to some extent they had been dealing with the mob. You can't deny that. One of the leaders is buried in a crypt in the Basilica in St. Apollinaris in Vatican City. You can't deny that you've been dealing with the mob. So he was thrilled. They went in there, and it was, listen, it wasn't shabby. It was, they had to open that outer part. Then they got into this part, right? It was sealed with 3 different layers of copper and silver and probably BS was probably the 3rd layer. Opened it up. He was perfectly preserved. He was in his blue little mafia suit. Only thing that was in somewhat bad shape was his white shirt had yellowed with age. Otherwise, he was in perfect shape. But nothing. There was nothing in there. They had thought maybe, there's a lot of speculation, of course, right? And they had thought perhaps Emanuela was buried underneath with him. But there was nothing of Emanuela in there. Then it comes to light that it probably wasn't the fact that Pietro was getting, getting his requests. He was making public requests for the authorities to exhume De Pettis's, to open the crypt. He thought, oh, I did this. Here's this poor guy who's riddled with guilt, right? And he thinks, I'm finally doing something for my sister. Come to find out it wasn't him. Later on, documents came out that the year that this was done, it seems as if the Vatican was getting nervous and they were in negotiation to have the crypt open and De Pettis moved because it was an embarrassment. So the Vatican is the one that greased the wheels to go ahead and get that crypt open because they wanted to get De Pettis out of there. And they knew he was there all along for years and years and years. But one thing did happen for Pietro, because De Pettis was his face, this was big news that the Vatican was tied to the mafia. And Pietro says he was looking through the papers one day and all of a sudden it comes to him and he couldn't believe it. Do you remember the officer who came forward, the police officer that came forward the day that Emanuela left, was taken? And he said, yeah, I saw her and she was in the company of this man and this is what he looked like. Pietro's looking at De Pettis' picture and he pulls it up side by side with that sketch from the sketch artist. What do you guys think? That sketch is done the day that Emanuela was kidnapped. And that was a picture of Pettis from that same time. I don't think there's a lot of denying. And Pietro says, oh my God, I finally know who took my sister. And remember what Sabrina Minardi had said. Sabrina Minardi had said, if she was dating him, she left her husband for him. And he sent Sabrina Minardi in a car with somebody else to take Emanuela and drop her off to somebody wearing a clerical dress in a car with Vatican plates. And now you look at this, and then there's a phone call that goes about De Pettis being buried in Vatican City. I don't think you could deny that that sketch was done the day she went missing. That's him. Look at the lips. Look at the nose, even the bridge of the nose. And this guy is buried in the basilica, and his girlfriend says that she took him to Marcinkus, who was the head of the Vatican Bank and Pietro Orlandi's boss for 23 years. I, you guys, you guys, you guys, come on. All right. I'm not going to give it all away because I want you guys to watch these shows. We're going to talk about these different theories, okay? And we've talked about one for quite a bit, so I think you know where I'm at with this, okay? So the first one that we have is the Magliana gang, right? Who DePitas was a leader of. He was a big guy. You have Sabrina Minardi, okay, who came forward. She's the one that left her football player husband to be with DePitas. And then you have Antonio Mancini. Antonio Mancini also came forward. He was also a gang member of the Magliano gang. And he came forward, he stated in an interview that he recognized the voice of Mario. Does anybody remember who Mario was? I wish I could give you a slicey if you got it right, but I don't have one for you. But who remembers who Mario was earlier in the story? Mario was the guy that made the phone call to the Orlandi family in 1983. Remember, that's right, Michaela, the caller. Okay. Antonio Mancini, another tie to DePitas, who's buried in Vatican City. Okay. He says, he came forward in an interview and says, I know that guy. I recognize that guy. That was a guy that worked for DePitas named Raffetto. And Sabrina Minardi came forward and said, yes. She said that Orlandi Emanuela was kidnapped by the Magliano on orders of Archbishop Marcinkus, who died in 2006. Sabrina Minardi did not come forward until 2006. Remember? They were scared. Okay? And she said that it was part of a power game. And she said Minardi also claimed that DePitas, she was doing what DePitas told her, that they kept Emanuela drugged, and they kept her captive in her apartment for several days, and then they moved her to another apartment in Rome before DePitas told her to drive the girl to a Vatican gas station and deliver her to a man dressed as a priest. Now I'm going to say, Minardi's credibility has been questioned several times because she's changed her story a couple times, and also because of an extensive history of drug use. But I'm also going to say, sometimes when there's too many coincidences, come on, man. Then there's the Vatican sex scandals. theory. Now listen, these all sound like different theories, right? To me, they all lead back to the same place. They all lead back to the same place. In July of 1993, somebody came forward by the name of Silvio Audi, and he made kind of ambiguous statements about Emanuela Orlandi, but he claimed that in the days following Emanuela's disappearance, that he overheard a conversation between two Vatican kind of like police officers who said they saw Emanuela returning to the Vatican the very evening of her disappearance in a luxury car. And that they couldn't see who was driving the car. But there was a lot of people coming forward saying that there was a lot of sex parties and things that were being held for priests of the Vatican. Sometimes girls, sometimes boys, but always very, very young. And this is a book that was written by somebody. It's not just me making this stuff up. This is a book you can even get on Amazon. I don't get a dime for it. It's just something I happened to find in the research. So this is stuff that's been said for a long time. But again, we're pointing back to the Vatican. Then there's the serial killer theory. This is one that I say was probably almost put out there to kind of throw people off the trail. There had been some girls over the years that had come up missing, but I think that's anywhere, right? That's anywhere. If you look over a 10 or 12 year period, you're going to see 10, 11, 12 girls missing, sometimes roughly around the same age. There was a couple girls that came missing close to where Emanuela went missing, but nothing ever came of that. And so they kind of, here it is, one theory about the disappearance is that she was a victim of a serial killer who targeted young women with job offers and kidnapped and killed them. Okay, and they kind of tried to tie it in because of a couple girls that went missing whose bodies were never found. To me, yes, there are serial killers. It's horrible what happened to those girls. I feel terrible for their family, but I don't think you can. I don't think there's enough here that would lend credibility to me believing this story over some of the other stuff that we've heard. Yeah, I always think it's horrible when the bodies aren't found because then there's never any closure for the family. The families certainly don't want their loved ones' bodies, but I almost think I would rather have a body after 40 years than after having listened to that audio tape of Emanuela being sexually abused, over playing that in my head for 40 years, wondering if that was still happening. If she had just been, was being passed around and drugged and passed around and passed around and passed around. You know, it killed me to listen to that audio tape, and I can't imagine what it's done to her brother all these years. This is an interesting one. Everybody's heard of WikiLeaks, right? You're right, Michaela. Serial killers don't call the family. And they kill. They don't leave audio tapes, and they don't leave pictures, photocopies of school IDs and things like that. They don't. So you guys have heard of WikiLeaks, of course, Julian Assange, right? But have you heard of VatiLeaks? Vatican Links, and the London Trail. In 2017, an Italian journalist came into possession of secret Vatican documents that had been stolen in 2014. And in those documents, one of the documents was signed March 28, 1997, and it was sent to two different archbishops in the Vatican. And it allegedly shows that the Vatican spent over 483 million lira, which is around 250,000 euros, supporting Emanuela Orlandi from 1983 until 1997, including expenses for her education and her medical care. The document suggested that Orlandi had lived in London under Vatican protection. If this is true, I don't think it was Vatican protection. I think she was still being held hostage. Probably, listen, if there was education, it was probably brainwashing. If there was medical care, she was probably really messed up after whatever happened to her. Medical care could have been shock treatments for all we know. 483 million lira? That she'd been living in London under the Vatican protection, and that her remains, don't know how she died, that her remains had been sent back to the Vatican following her eventual death. Now, this was not the first time suspicion came up about Emanuela being hidden in London, because on June 17th of 2011, remember, these papers weren't stolen from the Vatican until 2014. In 2011, during an Italian television program that included her brother, Pietro, somebody called in, an anonymous person called into the television program, and he identified himself as a former SISMI agent, claimed that Emanuela was still alive and being kept in a mental hospital in London. And the caller also claimed that the kidnapping had been carried out due to the fact that Emanuela's father was aware that there was money laundering being done on behalf of the Vatican Bank and Banco Abrasiano for the mob. The Vatican was laundering mob money, and when one of those banks went under, the mob lost a lot of money. That's not the first time I heard that. They said that she was also being kept at this place in London off of Brixton Road called Scalabrini Fathers, which is a place, it's like a hostel, I guess, somewhat for women, right? Now we have the theory about Atka and the KGB. Remember, Atka had tried to assassinate Pope John Paul II 2 years before Emanuela went missing. And then later that phone call came that said, after one of the 7 speeches the Pope made, where he mentioned Emanuela, 7, and it said that Atka had been trained by the KGB and that they would release Emanuela if Atka was turned over. They would offer a switch. Of course, That never happened. The Pope did go visit Akka, and Akka denied all of that. He said, I don't know him. They didn't train me. They didn't send me to kill him. Do not hand me over to them. Pope John Paul II did visit Akka in prison and forgave him. Well, he should have forgiven him, because it sounds to me like he was involved in a lot more dirt than Akka could ever be involved in. And then we have Marco Assetti. Marco Assetti is an interesting guy. And if you watch The Vatican Girl on Netflix, you're going to see him. At first, he shows up like this. And he alludes that he was involved in the kidnapping. And he just seems shady. I don't know. When you watch it, you tell me. But he was a photographer. And in 2013, he was convicted for the death of this little boy named Jose Garman. But he claimed to be one of the kidnappers of Emanuela. And what happened was, and he tried to offer a flute, that he said could have been Emanuela's, but there was no DNA evidence that was ever on it. But he got convicted for the death of Jose Garman. Jose Garman was a little kid. He was 12. He was 12 years old. And he'd gone missing from home. And Assetti hit him, ran him over and killed him. And they couldn't figure out how Garamond, the little boy, had gotten so far from home. And so they had thought maybe possibly Assetti had kidnapped him and then run him over to try to hide it. But Assetti always denied that, and he said that he ran him over by accident, that the child, just came out of nowhere running, which if he had been kidnapped, he probably would come out of nowhere running if he could make a clean break, right? But this guy's really, really, really shady. He later takes off his mask in one of the episodes. There's 4 episodes on Netflix, and he meets face to face with Pietro. And Pietro wanted to kill him. Pietro said he could hardly sit in his chair. He was so sickened by him. But what people have kind of said about Assetti is that he's just a narcissist. That he wants to believe that he's more important than he is, and that he really took little bits and pieces of what was out there in the press about Emanuela and just tried to fashion himself into being relevant somehow. Then we come back to the Vatican Bank, and the bank Ambrosino, which, listen, somebody came forward that had worked there, and in some papers that were released, there was a letter from this guy who had been kind of a big deal in the bank, and he wrote it to the Pope, to Pope John Paul, and he said, where is my other slide? I don't know where it went. What he said to the Pope was, I'm really worried. My heart is very heavy about these things that have happened and the money that was laundered and the things that we were involved in. Oh, you know what? Maybe that's the max that I'm allowed to have for my slides, because that's my 100th slide. That's probably what happened. And he said, I need your help. I need your help. And this letter that he had sent to the Pope, it was gotten a hold of. There was another secret document. 12 days later, he was found murdered. He was strangled with a rope, and then he was hung by that same rope that was under a bridge. He was then hung under a bridge over the Thames. But he was alluding again to the Vatican Bank, and Bank Ambrosino had laundered money for the mob. So now, that was my last theory, thank goodness. But then I did have some really cute pictures of, yeah, I guess 100. I guess that's all they wanted to let me have. I had some really cute pictures of Emanuela and her brother when they were children, and a beautiful picture of her mother. Her mother is still alive and lives in the apartment, by the way, in Vatican City, and she kind of reminds me of Sophia Loren. But I had some gorgeous pictures of Emanuela and her brother when they were younger. Pietro he was pushed out of the Vatican Bank after 23 years. The Vatican said that it was an early retirement. He said he was pushed out. He felt like he was getting too close to what had happened to his sisters, the ties between De Pettis, Marcinkus, the Vatican. He was getting too close. They pushed him out, and they also revoked his Vatican citizenship. He's no longer a citizen of the Vatican. It was revoked, he says, because he married an outsider. So I will leave you with that, my friends. What do you think happened to this precious, 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 precious girl? You guys have something to do with it? Old Pope John Paul here, he's been canonized. He's now a saint in the eyes of the Catholic Church. But what happened to Emanuela? What happened to that beautiful girl? And how close, well, she wasn't killed in Vatican City. What happened to her? And do you believe that there's more evidence pointing towards the Vatican's involvement? I do, but you don't have to agree with me. Go on YouTube. There's some fantastic things on there. One of them is under Secrets of the Vatican, a real crime, and it's about the Vatican girl, and you're going to hear about all of this stuff that I told you about. And then, of course, there's a lot more. There's a lot more true crime live streams like mine and podcasts. And then there's The Vatican Girl on Netflix, which has really shaken things up. But I think everybody that pretty much had anything to do with organizing what happened to Emanuela is dead now. And that's why people are starting to come forward. And I think Emanuela is no longer with us either. So wherever she is, we hope that she rests in peace. And yes, Michaela, you are right. There were many scandals in the Vatican Bank. And that's why one of the banks, it crashed. And they said that the Magliano gang in particular, lost a lot of money and they wanted it back. Because they weren't investing it in the Vatican, they were laundering it, and so essentially, in their eyes, the Vatican lost their money, and they wanted it back. So, anyways, go look at some other stuff, and interesting. Michaela says the Vatican hid her death. She's probably is buried in Campo Teutonico. Interesting. We'll have to look that up. Listen, don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this. And if you watch anything and you come up with some new theories, leave them in the comments for other people, okay? That's all I got for you. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed it. It was an intense case. And now I learned something new about my slideshows when I go over 100, because I had 25 more pictures. 25 more pictures for you. Now I know that when I hit 100, I have to do a second slideshow presentation, right? Listen, thank you for spending your time with me. I enjoyed spending it with you. And I don't know what the next case will be, but I will see you. Go watch some stuff about this, huh? Go do that. Thanks so much, you guys. I will see you for the next